we devoted our previous lessons to tracing the various reasons that led to the outbreak of the American Civil War. The first and foremost of these would be the issue of slavery. It was the issue of slavery that divided the northern states and the southern states, and it is this discussion that we have been having all this while. In this lesson, we will talk about the life of Abraham Lincoln. We will understand how Abraham Lincoln started off and how he went on to becoming the 16th President of the United States of America, and how his rule was very important during the American Civil War. So, let us begin our discussion on Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was born in the year 1809. He was born in a place called Hodgenville that was located in the southern part of the territory of Kentucky. Now, Kentucky, when Abraham Lincoln took birth, wasn't a US state. Instead, it was just a territory that lied in the southern part of the United States of America. Abraham Lincoln, as we know, became the 16th President of the United States of America. But he did not start off this way. Instead, he was born to a family of a very humble background. His family saw poverty and crisis during his childhood. It was a very hard-working family that Abraham Lincoln took his birth in. His father, Thomas Lincoln, was a farmer, and along with being a farmer, he also was a part-time carpenter, which explains why this family was very poor. In fact, the Lincolns lived in a small cabin in Kentucky. Now, despite being from a rural background and never been exposed to an urban life, Thomas Lincoln, that is Abraham Lincoln's father, had many democratic views. That is to say, Thomas Lincoln held liberal opinions. He held democratic ideals. And it is for this reason that Abraham Lincoln was also inspired by these ideals of democracy and liberalism. These ideals, or exposure to these ideals from his early childhood, also played a major role in shaping Abraham Lincoln who he was. So, it were the ideas of his father Thomas Lincoln that inspired Abraham Lincoln right from his childhood. Now, we learned that Abraham Lincoln initially used to live in Kentucky, which is located in the southern part of the United States of America. Now, soon after, the family shifted from Kentucky to Indiana. When Abraham was only 7 years old, his family then moved from Kentucky to the free state of Indiana. Now, during this time, Kentucky had joined the slave states. In our previous lessons, we learned that the various southern states together made up the slave states. And these states were founded on the continuance and the further reinforcement of the practice of slavery. Now, we learned that Thomas Lincoln was inspired by democratic and liberal ideals. Now, when Kentucky had joined the slave states, Thomas Lincoln could no longer accept to live within that same state. This is because the ideals that Thomas Lincoln harbored were against the practice of slave trade, or the very practice of using slave labor, which is why, for their own good, now this shift from Kentucky to Indiana also played a decisive role in shaping Abraham Lincoln's consciousness. This is because when they moved to the northern free state of Indiana, Abraham Lincoln now got to understand for a better reason that slavery was a horrible practice, and in the northern states he was also exposed to the democratic and liberal ideas in a better way. So this in turn served a major role in shaping the consciousness of Abraham Lincoln, which is why this shift from Kentucky to Indiana is of importance to us in our discussion on Abraham Lincoln. On your left, you can see the Lincoln family trail. The Lincoln family used the Ohio River to shift from Kentucky to Indiana. Now, Abraham Lincoln has been a very important personality in the history of the United States of America, which is why the Lincoln family trail, or the path through which this shift from Kentucky to Indiana happened, is marked even till date. Now, when they moved from Kentucky to Indiana, the Lincoln family was further enmeshed in lots more hardships. This is because after moving from Kentucky, Thomas Lincoln had to give up his job of carpentry. Now, when he shifted to Indiana, he had a hard time, and this further plunged the Lincoln family in poverty. Because of this, Abraham Lincoln's childhood was knee-deep in crisis, in poverty. Simultaneously with that, at a very young age, Abraham Lincoln also lost his mother. So this was a very difficult phase for the entire Lincoln family. Now, it was Abraham Lincoln's mother who had inculcated in him the love for reading. The love for reading and learning and knowing so many things. Now, Abraham had promised himself after his mother's death that come what may, he would never give up on this one habit of reading, on this one habit of acquisition of knowledge. Since his family was enmeshed in poverty, Abraham had to do a number of odd jobs throughout his childhood. He had to do that for the sustenance and maintenance of his family. Among the various odd jobs that Abraham Lincoln had to do for the sustenance of his family, he had to work in fields. He also worked as a boat operator. Along with that, he also helped his father in his carpentry business. He even worked in workshops. But throughout all the various odd jobs he pursued, one thing remained constant, that is his love for learning. You can see in these images that despite whatever work he was doing, he never gave up on this habit of learning, on this habit of reading. So, throughout his childhood and throughout his entire life, he tried his best to keep his zeal of learning alive, and it is this zeal of learning that propelled him forward onto becoming someone important. Now let us find out what happened to Abraham Lincoln after his childhood, that is how he navigated the later stages of his life. So it was his zeal for learning and reading that kept him alive. Along with that, when he was working and when he was shuffling various odd jobs, he once stumbled upon many books. And these many books were books on law. He found these books very interesting, and it is at this juncture that he realized that he wanted to become a lawyer. Knowing that his family could not afford to send him to a law school, he chose to educate himself. He kept on reading many books on law, and at the age of 25, he became a lawyer. But even after becoming a lawyer at the age of 25, he did not give up on his initial goal. He struggled with poverty, as you can see here, to become a lawyer. And after becoming a lawyer, it was his goal to help people who cannot afford legal services. That is to say, he wanted to help the poor who required legal services. And in this way, Abraham Lincoln started gaining popularity as a lawyer. After Abraham Lincoln's career started off as a lawyer, he slowly started to shine. And he gained huge popularity among the masses. But the most important reason that gained him popularity was his fairness and honesty. He was a very fair and honest lawyer who was committed to serving the poor, that is, serving the dispossessed, or serving people who required his help but could not afford legal services. Now, owing to his honesty and fairness, he went on to earning the nickname of Honest Abe, as you can see here. He was known as Honest Abe because Abe comes from Abraham. So Abraham Lincoln now went on to becoming a very popular and distinguished lawyer. It was his zeal for learning, for the acquisition of knowledge, that had him questioning the very institution of slavery. Now he was wondering how to abolish this institution altogether, or whether it was too indispensable. Now Abraham Lincoln did not just find the institution of slavery as unfair, he also found it as inhuman. This was a dehumanizing institution that reduced human beings to commodities, to products that were being bought and sold. Now Abraham Lincoln took it upon himself to abolish slavery altogether. He knew that he had to do something to put an end to slavery. In fact, he went on to saying that those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves. To put it simply, he said that people who are denying others' freedom, others' independence should also be brought under slavery. That is, people who are denying the freedom of others should not get to enjoy freedom themselves. Now, in this way, he had proclaimed himself as completely anti-slavery. And by proclaiming himself anti-slavery, he also proposed his stance that was in opposition to the rich plantation owners, the rich slave owners of the southern states. Abraham Lincoln wanted to do anything and everything possible to put an end to slavery. Abraham Lincoln knew that this was only what he could achieve as a lawyer. But if he gets to join politics, his impact would be more intense. That is to say, he will be able to achieve greater ends. He will be able to abolish slavery completely. And it is for this reason that Abraham Lincoln now joined politics. Like any normal person who wants to join politics in the US, Abraham Lincoln also had two options to choose from. The two options to choose from were the Democratic Party, that was the Conservative Democratic Party, and on the other hand was the more liberal Republican Party. Lincoln joined the Liberal Republican Party. Now let us find out what happened after he joined the Republican Party and how various people were responding to his decision of joining the Republican Party. So Lincoln joined the Republican Party in the year 1856. He knew that the Democratic Party did not do anything to stop or abolish slavery. In fact, it was the Democratic Party that had further strengthened the slave labor or the practice of slavery by enacting the Fugitive Slave Act. But on the other hand, when Lincoln joined the Republican Party in 1856, he had very different reasons in his mind for making this decision. He joined this party, that is, he joined the Republican Party because it favored rapid industrialization. The Republican Party favored rapid industrialization as opposed to agricultural expansion. We have learned that by agricultural expansion, we mean that more and more slaves were being required by the southern plantations. Now, if industrialization was favored and supported, agricultural expansion would be halted or it would come to an end. And if agricultural expansion can come to an end, the practice, the inhuman practice of slavery could also be abolished. It is this goal of the Republican Party that had inspired Abraham Lincoln into joining this party. Along with that, he also had another thought in mind. The Republican Party opposed the extension of slavery to new territories. The Republican Party was very liberal in nature. It was anti-slavery. That is to say, it proposed the abolition of slavery altogether. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, thrived on the continuance of slavery. But by joining the Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln now started opposing the extension of slavery. By this we mean that previously the Senate had achieved a state of equilibrium by having equal free states and equal slave states. Now, by opposing the extension of slavery into new territories, Abraham Lincoln thought that they would be able to stop the expansion of slave states. He wanted to ensure that the slave states in no way should get majority in the US Senate. It is the free states or the states that were inspired by the ideals of liberty and freedom that should get upper hand over the slave states. So for these reasons, he had joined the Republican Party in the year 1856. Now let me ask you a question before finding out how he navigated his way after joining the Republican Party. When did Lincoln join the Republican Party? Did he join it in 1860, 1780, 1856 or 1900? Yes, you are right. Lincoln had joined the Republican Party in the year 1856 because he was inspired by the democratic and liberal ideas that went on to forging or that went on to making the Republican Party as liberal as it was. Previously we have learned that Lincoln had become a very distinguished lawyer on account of his honesty and his fairness. Now after he joined the Republican Party in 1856, he soon rose up in popularity. The various people who were in the then Republican Party realized that if they had to overthrow the Democratic Party, they would require the leadership of Abraham Lincoln, which is why they now proposed Lincoln as the presidential candidate for the Republican Party. So it was now Abraham Lincoln who was proposed as the presidential candidate for the Republican Party. Now let's find out whether he really became the president, and if he did, what were the outcomes of that. In the year 1860, a very important thing happened. This is because Lincoln won the presidential election and he became the 16th and the first Republican president of USA. Previously, all the 15 presidents who had come to power in the United States were all from the Democratic Party. With the victory of Lincoln as the president of the US in the year 1860, now Republican Party came to power for the first time. It was a major breakthrough moment. Formerly, the conservative Democratic Party wanted the continuance of the practice of slavery. But now, with Lincoln becoming the 16th president of the US and the first presidential candidate from the Republican Party, things were going to change. And this is what people had hoped. But not all people of the United States were very happy with the outcome of this election, that is, with Lincoln becoming the president. This is something we will find out in a while. Now, Lincoln ruled as the president of the US from 1861 to 1865, and this period roughly covers the very period when the American Civil War was at full pelt in America. Lincoln held the view that democracy is government of, by and for the people. If all the people living in the country do not get equal representation in this democratic process, that country will not be a full democracy, because democracy ensures equal representation of all the citizens. If one group of people gets to enjoy their say, or if one group of people gets the upper hand over other groups of people, this cannot be called a democracy. So Lincoln wanted that all the people who would live in the United States of America during his rule as the president, all these people should get equal representation, and together with their equal representation, they would make America a truly democratic and liberal nation. This is a very important idea that Lincoln proposed during his rule, and he proposed this idea even before he became the president. We just raised this point a while back that not all people were happy with Lincoln becoming the new president of the United States of America. This is because the southern states continued to survive and continued to thrive through using the institution of slavery. They resorted to using forced labor or free labor from the slaves. And this free labor that the slaves rendered helped them in the pursuit of agriculture. And in this way, they growed cash crops in the likes of sugarcane, tobacco and cotton. This is something that we have learned. Now, when a democratic president was now coming to power, and a democratic president who was openly anti-slavery, the southern states started feeling threatened. The southern states were afraid because they thought that if this Republican president comes to power as the president of the US, the institution of slavery could be abolished altogether. That is, it could be wiped away from the face of America, which is why they felt threatened. They thought that the abolition of slavery could be bad for them, which is why the southern states now started feeling threatened and intimidated when Lincoln rose to power and succeeded in becoming the president of the United States of America. Now, what did the southern states do? Did they restrict themselves to feeling only threatened, or did they do something to counter the rule or to counter the power of Abraham Lincoln? Let us find this out. Even before Abraham Lincoln took his oath and came to the office, the southern states now started organizing themselves to secede from the Union. Now, Abraham Lincoln was in no way willing to let them break free of the Union, that is, break free of the federal structure of government. But the southern states now illegally came out of the Union. Firstly, 7 states came out of the Union. So, 7 of the southern states broke away from the Union. The first southern state to break away from this union was South Carolina, and it was followed by Mississippi and Florida. Soon after, the southern states of Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana and Texas also joined hands, and together these 7 states broke free of the Union. Now, when these 7 states broke away from the Union, this was an illegal confederation because they did not have the legal status of a country. This was an illegal confederation. Now, after Abraham Lincoln came to power, he saw that his country was divided into 2 parts. 7 states had already illegally seceded from the Union. The 4 other states that were also threatening to come out of this union were Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee and North Carolina. Now, together these 11 states broke free of the Union government or the federal government, and this secession happened in the year 1861. The secession from the Union, that is the secession of these 11 states from the Union into the formation of the new Confederate States, was the final step that led to the outbreak of the American Civil War. Now, Abraham Lincoln, after coming to power, saw that this was a divisive step on the part of these seceding states or on the part of these Confederate states. So, he declared this secession as illegal. He tried to bring under the Union all these states, but he ended up in failure, which is why he declared this secession as illegal. So, it was in the year 1861 that the American Civil War finally broke out after the secession of these states and the formation of the Confederate States. So, in this lesson, we got to know the famous personality that Abraham Lincoln was. We understood that Abraham Lincoln started from a very humble background. He struggled with poverty, but despite that, he went on to becoming a lawyer. He became a distinguished lawyer and then he also joined the Republican Party. He was openly anti-slavery and tried his best to abolish this practice of slavery. But after this Republican president came to power, the southern states felt threatened, which is why they decided to secede from the Union. 11 states seceded from the Union to form the Confederate States. Now, with this, we have come to a point where now the Civil War finally broke out. That is, the American Civil War finally broke out between the northern forces and the southern forces. That is, between the Union forces on the one hand and the Confederate forces on the other hand. We will devote our next lesson to understanding when this war finally broke out and the various events that happened after the outbreak of the American Civil War. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at DeltaStep.com or download the DeltaStep app to learn one-to-one with our amazing teachers or to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it's rewarding too. So register for free now.